Would it shock you to learn that Russia has plans to attack Poland? No, it would not. At this point, we are accustomed to the world at war and all of the nonsense that comes with it. What is unique about today, though, is that we now have more specific details on what Russia has planned and when the Kremlin might give the order. And this one is a doozy. It is how can I put this politely? Bold strategy designed to destabilize Ukraine, with some interesting logic at play. So, in today's video, I want to cover 5 things. First, I will explore the source of the intelligence report, as a preface for the rest of the speculation that follows. Then I will give the juicy details regarding what exactly the report says about the threat, plus some commentary on whether the whole thing could work. Fourth, I will examine a conspiracy theory that this is actually the United States setting up Poland to fail. And finally, we will explore why Russia may be trying to do this now. But let's start with the source of the report. And stick with me here because we are playing a game of telephone. Allegedly, US intelligence gathered the initial evidence. I need to underscore how the United States previously knew that Russia was about to attack Ukraine, despite all sorts of skeptical allies dismissing the sincerity of Putin's threats. At one point, it seemed like the United States was basically reading the Kremlin's emails, and there is no reason to think that that has changed over the last few years. The United States then relayed that information to Poland's president. Someone from his inner circle, presumably who was read into the conversation, then passed it along to a prominent Polish news website. It then made bigger headlines in the English-speaking world when its sister platform, The Telegraph, released an article on the subject. Keep this in mind for later, but the general idea of a Russian plot against Poland is nothing new. The Polish foreign minister, as well as Prime Minister Donald Tusk, have been saying similar things for a while now. The difference is that we have greater details on the subject. Or at least some of us have greater details on the subject. You can see here that the story broke through the outlets that lean left, but did not quite get any further out. Furthermore, there were significant differences in the framing of the report. Again, something to keep in mind for later. Right-leaning sources interpreted the threat as a greater concern, while left-leaning outlets emphasized that there was no confirmation yet that Russia planned to follow through. How do I know all of this? It's thanks to today's returning sponsor, Ground News. With Ground News, you can cover your blind spots with their very aptly named Blind Spot feature, which highlights stories disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum. I recommend toggling the View International Blind Spots button to better focus on the stories that I am more likely to care about. And by going to ground.news/linesonmaps or scanning the QR code on your screen, you can save a fantastic 40% off a Vantage plan, which grants you access to all of this information and more. So thanks again to Ground News for sponsoring today's video. With that, we can get to what exactly Russia may or may not be threatening. This is not a plan for a full-scale assault, as much of the online chatter fell back to. Hint, please read the articles, and do not just speculate on what titles may be alluding to. Rather, the plan Russia has in mind is some type of unconventional operation. The most likely candidate is to have some drones veer off course and enter Polish airspace, as though that is a new and original idea. Then, oopsie, it looks like the drones crashed into a power plant or some other critical infrastructure. What an unfortunate coincidence that no one could see coming. A more bizarre option floated is to have a helicopter get lost, cross into Polish territory, and then have more Russians come across to rescue the crew. A third and more extreme possibility is an actual hybrid attack, with Russian ground forces entering Poland via Kaliningrad or Belarus, the latter case possibly with Belarusian forces in tow, because that is something that apparently Lukashenko is going to approve, despite looking at Ukraine and telling Putin that he is a hard pass. I guess further because NATO is a softer target? Before going any deeper here, I need to forewarn you that much of what comes next looks like a strategy straight out of a gnome's playbook. But here goes. The military crisis then creates a political crisis inside of NATO. The United States pressures Poland not to respond militarily. The alliance receives a black eye, there is further disintegration within Brussels, and yada yada yada, aid is cut to Ukraine. Wait, did I say Ukraine? What? Yeah, the thing is, you cannot yada 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 away how Russia reaches the endgame with this crazy strategy. And hey, maybe there is something here. Poland and Ukraine are in the middle of a diplomatic dispute regarding Stepan Bandera, a World War II-era Ukrainian nationalist who collaborated with Nazi Germany to free Ukraine from the Soviet Union, but ultimately got himself a ticket to a German concentration camp. Pro tip, do not ally with Nazis. Anyway, I do not want to get lost in the weeds here, but Zelensky recently approved a special forces unit named after Bandera's movement. He remains a popular figure in some nationalist circles of Ukraine for his freedom fighter credentials, because a lot of people in the former Soviet Union really hate what the Soviet Union did to their former countries. And now that they are countries once more, they do not want to go back. But Bandera's movement also committed war crimes against Polish minorities on the order of 50 to 100,000 dead, so the folks in Warsaw do not look too kindly on the whole thing. So I guess I could see how Russia getting involved here could stoke nationalists in Poland to want to abandon Ukraine entirely. Then that causes some second-order upheaval for the rest of the alliance, and Russia gets what it wants. Or perhaps the Kremlin seeks an overreaction to the unconventional operation. To remind you of a recurring theme on this channel, Putin would really like to mobilize more forces to Ukraine, but he cannot because there is a lack of political acceptance within the country. Thus, a helicopter pilot gets lost, those unreasonable warmongers in Poland kill 5 innocent Russian soldiers, and so, in conclusion, please support my war in Ukraine, because remember, we are actually fighting NATO there. That is really the only way Russia makes any progress with the helicopter strategy, short of committing a false flag and killing the Russian troops themselves. Otherwise, it just makes Russian helicopter pilots look further incompetent. And certainly there is room for this to cause political disagreements in Brussels on how to respond, which could conceivably drive a deeper wedge into the alliance. Or it could, just result in Article 5's invocation, and the North Atlantic Council determining that the best way to restore security in the North Atlantic area is to write Ukraine a blank check. That makes for a good transition to our next point about this being a massive conspiracy. There is no real threat, and the United States leaked this information to Poland on behalf of Russia so as to convince policymakers in Warsaw that Poland is better off allocating all of its defense spending to the home front and not to Ukraine. Wake up, sheeple. Well, let's just put this to bed immediately. Baltic security personnel have confirmed the reality of the threat, and Baltic countries are nothing if not singularly focused on keeping Russia inside of Russia. Meanwhile, the intelligence report came with a warning that the purpose of the attack would be to force European countries to suspend aid to Ukraine. So, according to this conspiracy, you have Russia telling the United States to goad Poland into cutting aid to Ukraine by telling Poland that Russia is trying to get Poland to cut that aid. Okay. Then there is a connected conspiracy tied to how the United States is going to compel Poland to let Russian troops run amok across the border. How exactly does one think that Poland's chain of command works? That they see Russian troops coming across the border, and then they call the White House and ask for permission to strike? No. That is not how it works. That seems, at best, some sort of Soviet fantasy of how the CIA holds all of the puppet strings for all of NATO, rather than the alliance being a political organization that, by some miracle, gets everyone to agree on some major policies every now and then. If anything, it sounds like the United States was sharing the intelligence to help pre-plan a firm response, so that the alliance is not caught off guard when it happens. And if someone thinks that the United States was trying to pressure Poland into going easy here, and Polish politicians have not gone crazy in the press about this, then that person does not know Polish politics. The reality is that much of the day-to-day inner workings of NATO remain the same as a few years ago. Here are some recent photos of US personnel working alongside NATO allies during the annual Baltics operations exercise. It is important to distinguish between the United States seeking to take a support role in Europe from the United States abandoning European security. The changes in NATO from the last 2 years have been about the latter, and that is the policy that will carry through to whoever follows Trump. It is also worth noting that the US intelligence community has always been more pro-Ukraine than the president has been. So it would be quite a conspiracy indeed if the executive branch gave false information to Poland, and no one within US intelligence said a word about the lies therein. As a final point, let's discuss briefly the timing of this alleged incursion into Poland. I think it is tempting to look at the current situation and conclude that Russia's ability to coerce NATO in this way is fast running out. Russia's tactical advantage is in drone production and deployment. If the Kremlin felt like abandoning Ukraine tomorrow and suddenly redeploying its entire drone stockpile on NATO, there would be a long period of pain for allied countries. That is changing, though, with Allied Command Transformation's LCIX program beginning to test counter-drone operations. You can see how there is some window of opportunity here for Russia. Either get those drones in now, or accept the fact that there will be a struggle to do so later. In practice, this is not such a great idea. LCIX has a long phase-in period, with the first round of activities having occurred in April. There is no sudden power spike here, where Russia faces an immediate closing of said window of opportunity. Rather, the transition will occur over a long period, where Russia will just have to slowly accept that NATO's eastern flank is better able to defend itself. Actually, it is worth emphasizing that LCIX works as a counterbalance to the eventual power shift that will happen. Once Russia freezes the Ukraine war, the Kremlin will immediately redeploy resources to the NATO border. That creates a power spike, unless NATO can smooth it over with its own counterbalance. Remember, preventive war is not the only way to handle the side effects of a power shift. You can just choose to keep pace going the opposite direction. Rather, I think the best explanation for the current timing is that things are not going so well over in Ukraine. Or, more accurately, things are not going so well over in Russia, where gasoline is becoming increasingly difficult to find. There is no need to engage in reckless, high-variance strategies with negative expected outcomes when everything is going well for you. You only pull the goalie when you are behind and are willing to take risks to get back to par. Nonetheless, it is best not to conflate a report about a possible attack against Poland as an attack on Poland that has already happened. Russia may very well change its mind here, and even the publication of the report itself could sway some opinions in Moscow. Perhaps it is better to think of the Kremlin floating this possibility as an encouraging sign regarding where the Kremlin thinks the war might be headed over the next few months. But none of us are there yet. So, what are our takeaway lines for today? There is a report, likely of genuine origin, that the Kremlin is planning an unconventional attack on Poland. The Kremlin's ultimate goal is to further the war effort in Ukraine, but the causal pathway to get there is murky at best. At least that conversation is more plausible than the idea that this is all one giant US conspiracy. And it is best to think about the timing here as reflecting what is happening on the battlefield in Ukraine, rather than what NATO countries are up to. Thanks again to Ground News for sponsoring today's video. You can go to ground.news/linesonmaps or scan the QR code on your screen to take a fantastic 40% off Advantage plan. Also, if you have not been following, I have spent a lot of time over the last week publishing on my secondary channel. Check out some classic geopolitics helpline over there. And if you enjoyed today's video, then please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you tomorrow. Take care.